America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. McCausland, will you please take roll?
Mrs. Feist. Here. Mr. Grisbeck.
Here.
Mrs. Hoppy.
Here.
Mrs. Janasek.
Here.
Mr. McGregor.
Here.
Mr. Modrak.
Here.
Mr. Scalzo.
Here.
Mrs. Turner.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
All 9 members present.
Is there a superintendent's report?
Yes, I have 3 things. Oops, turn that microphone on. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We'll start with some citations. Citing the meaningful contributions that school boards make on behalf of public education and students, Governor Tom Wolf has proclaimed January 2022 as School Director Recognition Month. The governor stated that school directors provide a passionate voice of advocacy with local, state, and federal leaders for public schools and the welfare of public school children. School directors, who are unpaid, devote hours each month to the challenging and complex responsibilities of board business, including voting on financial matters, adopting policy, and conducting long-range planning. Research shows that school board actions have a direct effect on student achievement. Therefore, it is crucial that boards engage in actions that increase their effectiveness for the betterment of the students they serve. In honor of school board's commitment to our students, schools, and community, I want to recognize the contributions and service of the Bethel Park Board of School Directors by presenting each with a certificate and our expression of sincere gratitude for your service. So I'll move these around. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Right there on the fridge. And then shop for a frame where you can keep it, but it certainly represents, I think, a sentiment among the administrators and faculty and staff and support staff that the board has been fastidious, dedicated, and diligent in your efforts to make sure that Bethel Park will be and continues to grow to be best in class. So thank you. The second item is just a quick refresher, and I'm going to ask for Mr. Mench's help with this item, but not long ago the board was told about a grant opportunity for transition planning for special education students. We just wanted to make sure the board was aware of a survey aspect that comes with that. So Dave, do you mind reminding us again about the grant?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Walsh. So when we approved that grant, there was some questioning back and forth. I believe it was with Mrs. Turner and myself about the program. And a part of this grant is getting out in front with the community and understanding what our transition needs are in the community for our students with special needs. And a part of that grant is putting out the survey to our stakeholders to get their thoughts and feelings on that matter. And I know we talked that night about the survey in brief, but just wanted to make sure, because one of the requirements of the grant is to make sure that the board is apprised that there is a survey. And so while we briefly talked about that, it's not listed in the board note. It just says that we're accepting the grant, even though we verbally discussed that. So I wanted to make sure that was clear to the board.
Yeah, thank you. And we do not have the survey yet to share with the board, and it's focused on the transition population.
Yes,
Yeah.
and opportunities, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, third item, a little more in-depth, is to talk to the board about the administration's findings from our analysis of the Dogwood Charter School application that the board was presented with back in December. The board is aware of the application filed by the Dogwood Charter School for a charter to operate a school inside the Bethel Park School District. The board heard testimony on December 18th of 2021 from the Dogwood Charter School applicants, as well as others in support of their application. A team of Pennsylvania certified educators and administrators working for the Bethel Park School District reviewed and evaluated the DCS application. The application was also reviewed by our solicitor and an outside educational consultant with knowledge of the South Hills of Pittsburgh educational community. The Bethel Park School District administration takes very seriously the request for the district to grant a charter to open a school and provide a free and appropriate education to any child who opts to attend within our borders. With that seriousness of purpose in mind and based on specific criteria, the charter school application was evaluated according to Section 1702-A and 1719-A of the Pennsylvania Charter School Code. The evaluation was based on 4 criteria. Number 1, demonstrated show of support from the larger community. Number 2, the capability of the charter applicant in terms of support and planning to provide a comprehensive learning experience to students. Number 3, the extent to which the application considers the information requested in Section 1719A and conforms to the legislative intent outlined in Section 1702A of the Charter School Code. And 4, the extent to which the charter school may serve as an educational model for other public schools. The board received a comprehensive report of the evaluation with all of the criteria in detail. For the public record, the administration will now present a general summary of our findings on those 4 criteria. First, is there demonstrated sustainable support for the charter school plan by teachers, parents, other community members, and students, including comments received during the public hearing. The DCS application came with 7 letters of support from business owners around the South Hills of Pittsburgh, 140 letters of support or pre-enrollment forms from parents of prospective students, 21 of whom specifically live in Bethel Park, 33 letters from others, non-parents. Of the 33 letters, 3 mention the Bethel Park location, 16 mention a Chartiers Valley location, 14 do not mention a location. There were 152 electronic signatures of support on an e-petition. It's important to note that we did not look for any overlap between letters and electronic signatures or public testimony. Of the 152 electronic signatures, 33 live in Bethel Park. Public testimony or statements of support were heard by the board from 6 people during the December 14th public hearing. This included 1 prospective student and the landlord for the proposed school building. 1 former Bethel Park teacher spoke, and 1 parent of 2 prospective students. The second criteria is the capability of the charter applicant in terms of support and planning to provide a comprehensive learning experience to students pursuant to their plans. The evaluation team determined the Dogwood Charter School complies with almost all of those provisions, including accountability to the parents, the public, and the Commonwealth, meaningful parent and community involvement, participation in the Pennsylvania State Assessment System. It was undetermined if the Dogwood Charter School would comply with the provision for educator certifications. There was no evidence provided. The evaluation team determined the Dogwood Charter School application does not comply with the provision to provide a minimum of 180 days of instruction 900 hours per year of instruction at the elementary, 990 hours per year of instruction at the secondary level, because of their intention to offer an early dismissal every Friday. The third criteria is the extent to which the application considers the information requested in Section 1719A and conforms to the legislative intent outlined in Section 1702A. The Dogwood Charter School application included the requisite information in varying degrees of clarity and appropriateness on all of those items. Here are some highlights. The analysis of the governance structure was provided by the law firm of Weiss, Burkhardt, and Kramer. The financial plan for the charter school under Section 437 was evaluated by our Director of Finance. There were no delimitations identified in their analyses. Part of the evaluation team made a visit to the proposed location of the Dogwood Charter School at 1008 Progress Court in Bethel Park. There are necessary renovations and alterations for that location in order for it to serve as a school. The evaluation team was led to believe that the landlord is willing to make those renovations and alterations if the charter were approved. Another factor of the evaluation was the staffing plan. Dogwood Charter School states that 100% of the non-certified teachers will be highly educated and experts in their fields. The application, however, was not specific about the type of person that might be and what they would be teaching. There are statements in the application that all the individuals employed by or serving the school will have the requisite clearances, and the school will have the necessary liability insurances, but they do not have employees yet. The Dogwood Charter School application did not include information on the requirement to enter into agreements regarding participation of the charter school students in extracurricular activities within the school district. The fourth evaluative criteria is the extent to which the charter school may serve as a model for other public schools. We believe it is the intent of the Charter School Code to establish and maintain independent charter schools which accomplish all of the following. 1, improve student learning. 2, increase learning opportunities for students. 3, encourage the use of different and innovative teaching methods. 4, create new professional opportunities for teachers, including the opportunity to be responsible for the learning program at the site. 5, provide parents and pupils with expanded choices in the types of educational opportunities that are available within the public school system. And 6, hold the schools established under this act for meeting measurable academic standards and provide the school with a method to establish accountability. In my view, this is the most important aspect of the evaluation. For this part of the presentation, I have our curriculum coordinators and Director of Student Support Services ready to offer a brief synopsis of their evaluations.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh. We looked at the curriculum, and I focused on the Pennsylvania standards and the English language arts and reading standards. And one of the things that we noticed was the curriculum stated that we should start looking at home education for detailed instructions on teaching reading. That material was not provided, and as far as we can tell, that's based on a book that is over 100 years old and that does not reference the current science of reading or other movements on the explicit teaching of acquiring reading that the state is pursuing at this time. We also found that foundational skills of the Pennsylvania standards are missing in the first grade curriculum materials, that composition is all oral in first and second grade, which does not meet the Pennsylvania Standards 1.4 for writing. We also did not find evidence of technical writing or reading and writing standards for science and technical subjects and the history and social studies reading and writing standards in the Dogwood curriculum materials. And we found that the standards on grammar, There was not evidence of instruction on those standards in the curriculum documents provided by Dogwood Charter.
Specifically looking at, in addition to the PA core academic standards, there was no reference to the career and work standards. And I don't know that everyone is familiar with those, but those were adopted in the 17-18 school year. And those are designed so that students can explore personal passions and interests that leads them into a career plan and then implementing that career plan in 11th grade. It's a really important piece of education besides the academics, and they refer to their work in that regard as their cultural capital philosophy, and it was not at all up to par of what students are being offered in the public school systems in Pennsylvania. In general, there was really not a lot of 21st century learning, specifically not any mention of technology being used as a tool for teaching, being used as a tool to show what you know. A lot of the research that was cited throughout it was very outdated, most of it back to 2007. No mention of STEM careers, which we know are on the rise. Students need to be exposed to new and up-and-coming careers such as coding, digital fabrication, computer science. All of those things were lacking through the binders of reports. And also, in general, very shallow learning. They really rely a very heavy focus on narration and retelling. Even their major exams that they offer the students do an oral retelling. And not to give you too much educational jargon, but the state, when crafting state assessments, uses what's called depths of knowledge. A DOK-1 is a very shallow question. It's a recall question, and that seemed to really be where they were landing with the narration and the retelling type of questions. We're looking for students to be using complex and abstract thinking, defending their answers with reasoning and conclusions. We're also looking for students to have multiple answers, multiple approaches to problem solving, and real-world applications of content. All of those things were lacking from their curriculum.
Thank you, everyone. My job was to look at the student support services that were offered by Dogwood Charter Schools. And as Dr. Walsh alluded to, the comment of non-certified teachers will be experts in their field. Our first concern for us was special education teachers would certainly be a necessary component of a program where we would be following the CSPG guidelines that the state has put forward because those individuals are highly trained on how to implement modifications, adaptations in the curriculum to the students and to help teachers to do that as well. There's a lack of specificity about the full continuum support, itinerant, supplemental, full-time levels of support. I mean, we have 13 disability categories in the state of Pennsylvania, and even within that, there's a broad range, and how those disabilities would be supported through supplementary aids and services in the educational program there. The implementation concerns with implementing related services such as OT and PT in the program there lacks any specificity. The pre-referral strategies are lack definition in how they implement intervention strategies to help students not rise to the level of needing special education support. The idea of getting it the first time, which was a comment made in the report, just is not, a feasible expectation for all students. And as someone involved in student support systems and services, I don't find that to be a reasonable expectation for our students. And we have to have methods to catch that for those youngsters that are in those 13 disability categories. And example might be therapeutic supports for emotional support students that most certainly would be needed during the school day. And then just the last piece of that is that, it cost us $34,000 or more to educate a student with special education needs. And if you look at the budget there, that would put, if they had 10 students, identified students, that would eclipse that budget right there. And that would concern me that they would be able to live within that budget based on what we know to educate students with special needs. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, folks. So, conclusion then, based on the 4 criteria, according to Pennsylvania Charter School Code, and based on our interpretation of the 6 intentions of the charter school law, and based on our evaluation of the information presented in the analysis, based on the lack of clarity, specificity, and necessary detail, and based on the achievement levels of other Charlotte Mason schools upon which their application is based, the evaluation team does not recommend that Bethel Park School District grant the Dogwood Charter School a charter for the 2022-2023 school year, and ask approval for the administration to prepare a resolution on this matter for the board to vote on at the February meeting. Are there any questions?
No, very good summary. Do we need to vote on
Just,
you moving forward? Or
no,
just
I
a
would just,
general
with your
agreement?
approval, I will put a resolution on the motion for February based on that recommendation. But this is an opportunity if members of the board disagree with our findings and want to approach this differently.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with your recommendation. Again, we're not rejecting or approving the actual application. It's just, you know, for the administration to put a motion on the agenda, for February.
Correct.
And we can have additional conversation at that point in time once we bring that to a vote, correct?
Sure, or you can have it now, if there's something you in particular you want to
No,
make sure
nothing
we
pressing
focus
for me at
on.
this point, no.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Thank you, that's all I had.
Are there any public comments on agenda items? Do we have anybody?
There are no callers at this time.
Nobody signed up to speak either.
Okay. Any committee reports?
We had a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee meeting last week. The committee worked on creating our survey for students and kind of updating that to make sure that we can do the best we possibly can to make sure that all students feel welcome and included in our school environment.
Just a brief report from Steele Center. I visited last Thursday and was wowed beyond my expectations there. We have 89 Bethel Park students enrolled at Steele Center in all but one of their programs, and there are 18 programs. Just very, very impressed, and I'm excited to go back and learn some more. I didn't even get to see it all. But our students are doing really, really well, and really proud and excited to see what their futures hold. So that's it.
Just add to that, if you don't mind, that at the February business meeting, we will expect to have the executive director at Steele Center here to present to the board the renderings and proposals that they have for renovation at Steele Center and what Bethel Park's share of that responsibility would be, and then ask for your support in a motion in the spring to support their borrowing and proceeding with those renovation plans. So that's coming in February. Thank you.
Any other committee reports? So I attended the Park and Recreations committee meeting, I think it was last Wednesday, and just a push for them, there's a comedy night in Bethel Park on the 29th. I think they're still selling tickets. They have a few left, so if you're interested in having a fun night, go buy a ticket. There was a question that came up, and maybe somebody in administration can help with this, but the Park and Recs Board was wondering if we have a alumni list that we market to, because I think that you know, they're looking also as a way to reach out, kind of highlight what's going on, possibly you know, raise donations, investments into some of the projects that they're doing. So I don't know if you guys, I don't even know if that exists, but I just said I would ask.
Dr. Ginsana, you're up there. Do you happen to know?
No, I don't know, Doc.
Okay. Yeah, if you could just check into it, you know, they were going out to some third parties to try to access a list like this, but not having a lot of success. So if we already have one, we can share, that'd be great.
Sure, we'll follow up with Chuck. Thank you.
Okay. Those were the main topics I wanted to update people on here. Any other committee reports? Any other meetings that were held? Okay. Let's go through the agenda then. So I guess it's probably worth just reviewing here. What we started last year, there's a little bit of, should this be turned down a little bit? I'm getting some like feedback or echo or something, I think. But the, what we had started last year was to go through in these committee meetings to create a consent agenda. And so if we kind of go through here, have some discussion, everybody's on board, it goes into a consent agenda, and then that becomes one agenda item going into the voting meeting. So one vote to adopt everything on that consent agenda. It speeds things up, and we don't just end up, wasting a lot of time moving things that we already agreed on the previous week. So as we go through each one of these sections, the committee member can, introduce it, speak up if you have any questions. But the goal would be to, identify what items on each of these committee lists we do not want to be a part of the consent agenda, and obviously have discussion about any other questions you have about any of the other topics. Okay? So, Mr. McGregor, do you want to take Personnel Committee?
Yeah, tonight there are 7 items. There's number 1, approval of extra duty responsibility program, 21-22. 2, acceptance of resignations. 3, appointment of personnel. 4, approval of unpaid leave of absence. 5, approval of substitutes. 6, a memorandum of understanding with the Bethel Park Transportation Department, Council 84. And number 7, approval of administration tuition reimbursement. Any comments, questions on items 1 through 7?
I had one question on the appointment of personnel. So I see we have bus driver, bus aide, bus mechanic. I know we were a little bit close to kind of the critically low level a week and a half ago or so. How are we looking now?
Still critically low. Some of these folks will, the bus driver will certainly help, but we were down 4 yesterday with COVID, so we're still
Okay.
in that critical.
Okay.
Okay. No other questions or comments. I move items 1 through 7 to be put on the consent agenda.
Second. We don't need to move or vote. If there's no objections, everything will go on to the consent agenda. Okay, Mr. Greisbeck, you want to take, do we have anything under? Oh, there was no curriculum. What are you doing, Vince?
Oh, here we go.
That's just a joke. We can have a little fun here. Okay. So, Mr. Greisbeck, do you want to take Finance Committee?
Yeah, we have 9 items on the agenda for finance this week. 1 through 4, just the standard salaries, bills, financial reports, and budgetary transfers. Then on item number 5, we have the approval of Hayes Design Group for Phase 2 of the IMS project. For item number 6, we then have the agreement with SiteLogic IQ to, or SiteLogic, I always want to throw the IQ on there for some reason, to conduct an energy audit. Just want to point out that this will not cost the district anything. Item number 7 is to commit money from the fund balance for a student legal settlement. Item number 8 is to approve a lease agreement for Head Start and Pre-K Counts program at William Penn. And then item number 9 is accepting a donation from Piata Group LLC for the purchase of equipment for the BP High School Student Store. Does anyone have any questions about any of those items?
Just to identify the difference between both agreements in the SiteLogic motion. One is approving them to conduct that energy audit, which is a precursor to applying for the GISA status for the IMS project. The other is to have SiteLogic serve as our construction manager firm that will be further detailed as we get that energy audit, and the final price estimate of the project will then become part of their agreement, because they guarantee the cost not to exceed, and they also guarantee the energy savings associated with it. So this is sort of a preliminary, let's get started, and we'll follow up in the spring with a more detailed proposal.
Thank you for the clarification. Would anyone, does anyone, any other questions about any of those items? Would anyone like any of those held out from the consent agenda for next meeting?
Mr. McCausland, sorry, the, which one was it? The fund balance, you're doing the same thing you've done in the past, which means we have a student that we have come to an agreement with.
Yeah,
And
you
there is
had
a
a
settlement
student
number.
agreement, you had a settlement, so I set that money aside in your fund balance for legal purposes, because that money can be held and used until they're 21 years of age.
Correct. More explanation for everyone else, but just wanted to make sure, because there's several of those, so they are
We
identified.
have about 4 or 5 now. Yeah,
Right, and they're each identified, so.
they are. They're all separated.
Okay, so everybody's okay with adding all 9 of those items to the consent agenda? Good. Policies, Ms. Turner.
The approval of the third and final reading would be moved to the consent agenda on policy 30811. And then revisions of policy 815.2 is the second of 3 readings, and revision policy 916 for volunteers is a first of 3 readings. Dr. Walsh, this was language cleanup, correct?
Right. Item number 2, you'll actually have a presentation next week from members of the discipline committee who recommended those policy changes. Just to keep that cycle going, we started the public readings of the policy before you heard from them on their presentations, but you'll hear that next week prior to any vote. Item 3 is new. It's just a policy recommendation from PSBA.
Correct. And so it's language cleanup to make sure we comply with PSBA. That's exactly what I thought.
Yes, correct.
So 1 goes on the consent agenda, 2 and 3 go on for another reading.
Okay. Yeah, that's right, because the other 2, we still have,
Right.
it's
Cycle.
considered a reading
But it's
next
a
week
cycle.
also. Yeah. Okay, so we'll add number 1, there's student agreement in E. Under other, I don't see a reason to withhold that separately. Okay, that's it. For the agenda items, I guess, if there are any new items, because there could be some new items.
Sherry, you got one more?
Yeah, well, there'll be potentially several, we usually have a personnel item or 2 to move forward that'll be separately held out, and it will not be in the consent.
It'll
Again,
be
anything new
separate.
from tonight on will be separate.
Right, separate. Okay, very good.
Mhm.
Okay, any public comments that have come in about anything?
There are no public comments.
Okay. Any board comments?
I do. I'd like to give a shout out to Brian DeLallo for what he did with his players, having them go out. And I know the practice was canceled, but shoveling snow for the elderly or anybody who is disabled. I mean, that just shows who we are as a community. And I loved it. It was wonderful. So thank you, Brian DeLallo, for doing that.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That really was.
The best part for me was it wasn't meant to be a publicity stunt or anything like that. It was just meant for his team to, we're canceling weightlifting and go out and do something positive. I don't think he or anyone thought it would be on the news or in a
Right.
newspaper. But very impressive none the least.
Right. Any other comments? Okay, then we're done. I can adjourn, we don't have to vote, right, on adjournment?
He motioned to.
Can I have a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? If so, you can stay here. Meeting adjourned.